Welcome to the More You podcast at One More Studios. I'm Marcella Zanetti, your host, and we are here today with a renowned artist whose work would leave your jaw dropped. I mean, there is some serious talent in this room right now. She is the founder of One More Studios, entrepreneur, real estate tycoon, and world-famous artist from New York. The doyen of the hyperrealism movement started in the 70s, along with Dwayne Hansen and John DeAndrea, with over 1 million views on social media, pieces in museums all over the world, and over 19 permanent museum collections from Sunnyvale, California to Peekskill, New York. She has taught classes at the Met Museum. She has pieces owned by the Clintons, Emperor of Japan, Nike, Forbes, and hold on, my favorite one, Maluma. You guys know Maluma. I mean, Colombian artist. Look, you guys know who I'm talking about right here. Oh! You guys know who this is. He bought her artwork. That is how amazing she is. She has 4 books written about her, and there's an autobiography in the works, soon to be published. And guys, this is just some of the highlights we have. The list goes on and on. This woman right here is amazing, and I'm pleased to welcome Carole Feuerman.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Great. We're so happy that you're here. Thank you for being here. Let's get right into it. What do you think?
Let's go.
So, what is hyperrealism?
Good question. Hyperrealism is when a sculptor makes a three-dimensional object that is so real that a person could be standing in the room and you can say, is that real or is that a sculpture? So right down to every little freckle, you can see the veins, the eyelashes.
Wow. I can imagine that could be very hard to do as well. So when did you get into your artwork? You know, what is the starting point of your career?
Well, I always like to say I started my career when I was 3, and I took shoe polish and drew a picture all over my mother's new floor. Of course, I couldn't wipe it up, but my actual first sales were in high school, and I always knew from a young age that I was going to be an artist. I knew before I even knew what an artist was. I knew because I loved art. I loved to get my hands dirty. I loved to paint, to draw.
Wow.
To create.
So you feel like you were born with this artistic talent. Do you think it's more that you're born with it or that it's about the hard work and developing skill? What do you think of that?
I think it's both. I mean, you have to be born with the talent, and then you have to have the passion, and then you have to develop your skill.
So does it run in the family? Is there anybody else in the family who's artistic? You know, I understand you do have children and grandchildren as well. Have any of your children or grandchildren taken on this artistic gene?
I think every one in my family is somewhat creative. I think many people are creative, but it's a struggle to make a living as an artist and to do that for your life's work. You have to have a lot more passion. And my children, one is a doctor, and my other is she works at Colgate-Palmolive, and my other daughter is studying nutrition and finance. And my grandchildren, of course, one's going to be a vet, and, you know, they have various, and others going to be a gymnast and this and that. And my 5-year-old grandson wants to be a soccer player. But, you know.
So it's all over the place.
I don't think any of them actually want to be a professional artist, but they're creative.
Creativity runs in the fam. That's great to hear. So you are known for your swimmers. When did you start sculpting your swimmers?
I started doing it in the 70s. I did a body of work prior to that, and it didn't go over too big in Fort Worth, Texas, in the Bible Belt in the 70s because it was erotic art. And being an artist and with open views, I didn't realize that our country was not going to accept that type of work. So I thought I'd do the opposite and what would be like a wholesome Americana, and I did my first swimmer, and that was I started it in 1790, in the end of the 70s, and in 1981, I completed my first swimmer and showed it at a gallery called the Hansen Gallery.
Mm-hmm. So that's crazy. That's why they call you the doyen of hyperrealism.
Right.
You started it way back in the 70s, even before this type of art was accepted. So,
well, it was not even done.
Yeah.
No less it was not accepted for years and years, but nobody did that, except for those two other artists who were working simultaneous to me. But Dwayne Hansen was doing accident victims. He started doing that, and John D'Andrea did nudes. And I was mostly doing fragments, like the body of a swimmer, like from here up without arms. But I did fragments, and they did full figures.
Okay. So you differed a little bit.
A lot.
A lot. And that's got you to amazing places. I'd like to ask, where do you take your inspiration from? What drives you? What inspires you to create these pieces, whether it's the swimmers or anything else, other sculptures you make?
My art is each piece is the result of a feeling that I have, and something that happened to me in my life. For instance, I had a very difficult childhood, and I was not encouraged to be an artist. My parents wouldn't pay for my art education. I had some of my teachers said I wasn't good enough, and those things actually made me want to do better. And I took on that challenge, and I did a sculpture years later called Survival of Serena, which had to do with immigrants floating in on tubes from Cuba to Key West. I did a Perseverance.
Let's take a look. Let's see. This is Perseverance.
Yeah, and that's
right here.
That is one of my concepts. To
lovely.
persevere. And very famous sculpture is called Balance, and it's a woman in a yoga position. And these inspirations are from my own feelings and things I went through to be who I am. So that's that. I draw the inspiration from my own experiences.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. Let's take a look. This is Serena right here. You said this was inspired by immigrants coming from Cuba to Key West. Wow.
The earliest one didn't have a crystal cap. It was more like a girl on a tube, and the tube was gray, and it was more realistic. But I only do one to of these monumental ones. I'll either do one or I'll do three. And since they were sold, I had to make a version. So I did the first crystal cap one.
That's great. I'd like to say that I love the crystals. Huge fan of sparkles. But I want to get back into what you were talking about, your hardships. What are some of the biggest hardships you faced at the beginning of your career, or even in the midst of your greatness? You said you had a little bit of a hard upbringing. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I had a lot of hardships. I had a hard upbringing. I was raised by my grandparents because my mother had mental illness, and my father was busy trying to keep her from, locking herself in her room and things. And I had other situations that happened along the way where women weren't accepted in the art world. I had children, and all three were sick. And all along the way, there have been very difficult things to overcome, and that's like a blessing. Having something to overcome is really hard, but once you overcome it, you really get a lot of confidence in yourself, and you really feel good. In certain cases where I've helped my children overcome their illnesses or save their life, it brings you closer together. So, some people live very bland lives. I've had a very exciting life, and I'm writing an autobiography about it. And the good and the bad and the ugly, it's all good.
You sound like a superwoman. you have gotten to where you are today by all these hardships growing up. And I think it's very interesting and important to hear how people come from either nothing or having a hard life and are able to become successful people like you have. And it reminds us, we're human. We have hardships in life. We make mistakes. And I think that's very inspiring. You have transformed your artwork into something amazing and created a life and career out of it. I do want to talk about, I'm curious, what is the biggest mistake do you think you've made when creating an art piece or anything?
I don't know.
You don't.
I've made mistakes, but I don't know about making
Yeah.
a mistake. When I make a piece and I don't think it's good, I just throw it away or give it away or something. But I've made mistakes by not going with a certain gallery or not doing something else, But they don't always work out bad. Like when I first did the erotic art, and it was, I thought, oh my God, this is the biggest mistake. But when I had my first show in Manhattan, Malcolm Forbes bought all my erotic pieces, and it launched my career. So was it a mistake? It wasn't. Everything is exactly right.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. How you bounce back from those mistakes is what really matters. And I think that's important to shed light upon. And, it's not easy being an artist, especially as a woman. Was there ever a point where you felt the world was crashing down on you and you thought about giving up? Was there ever a time where you thought about giving up?
No.
Or okay.
Never.
She knew right away, guys.
Never, ever, ever give up.
That's
Never.
great. That is great.
There's always a reason for everything, and if you stay with it long enough and you believe in yourself and you have passion, then you'll get where you're going. But it isn't so much as getting where you're going. It's really that you have to enjoy the journey, the process of making art, the process of whatever you're doing, singing, dancing, whatever you're doing. If you live your life for the fact that you want to get somewhere, you want to be famous, you want to be this, you want to be that, it may not happen, and you won't get joy out of what you're doing. So you have to try to, if you're doing it, you have to do it because the actual fact that you're doing it should bring you joy. Yes, I've made sculptures, monumental sculptures in the wrong material. They've been outside, people bought them, and then they broke because they weren't made out of bronze or whatever. You learn, but I had to replace them with a bronze one.
It must be tough.
But, you learn as you go, and that's life. You don't know everything when you're born. You learn as you go, and mistakes are your greatest teachers.
That's great, and I think that's a wonderful message for all the young artists out there. What other advice would you give to somebody who's starting out or wants to be an artist? That's for you folks watching. What would you say to these people?
I think it's really important to go within yourself, and to do work that has to do with your own feelings and what you want to say. You have to think about what you want to say. It's one thing to go to school and you study this and you study that technique and whatever, but that's not going to make it. And when you take your work to a gallery, galleries will tell you that they don't show that type of work, which is what I heard over and over. So if you do your own thing, they're going to say that. So you have to perseverance, no matter what.
Perseverance.
That's
right here.
right.
That's
and believe
great.
in yourself.
That's great.
So what my to sum it up, what I would tell young people in any creative field, whatever they're going into, is they should believe in themselves. Don't believe what other people say. Enjoy what you're doing. If you don't enjoy it, do something else. Enjoy, love what you do. Count your blessings. The glass is half full.
Yeah.
It's how you look at it, and keep on doing it.
I completely agree. And I'd like to transition a little bit to the process. I want to know, how do we make something like this? This is insane. It's beautiful. I want to know, what's your process? How do you do it?
Every single piece has a different process. depending on if it's going to be inside on someone's table or it's going to be a 36-foot monumental double diver that I did for Sunnyvale, California. That had to be earthquake proof. It had to have an armature. I had to work with engineers from both from Arizona, where I made it, and California, where it got gifted to the city. The engineers had to okay it. The engineers had to design a pedestal. So the process is different per piece. Sometimes there are teams of people that I work with. My own studio, I have 14 people, and everybody pretty much has a different job, from my bookkeeper to my studio manager to my videographer and social media person to my fabricators who help. They work downstairs in One More Studios, and they put the pieces, they make the pieces into the epoxies, or the bronzes are done at foundries. And then I have a team that sands and chases them and details them, and then I have a painting team. And then I even have someone who works for me who does each eyelash, eyelash by eyelash, and everything is made out of either epoxy or bronze, except for the eyelashes, and even the eyebrows are painted on. So, which is
what
like
are the eyelashes made out of?
They're made out of mink.
Oh, she's fancy. Wow. So you have a large team behind you, fueling your artistic views and your creations, which that sounds great. You've had to build that up over the years through your career.
Believe me, you don't go to art school and learn how to learn how to do hyperrealism. It's just not that broad an area. Yeah. There's only about 40 to 50 hyperrealists in the world.
Wow. So you're
labor intensive.
Very unique too. Wow. So I'm kind of taken aback because it seems like it would be a very hard thing to do, and you do it so perfectly. I want to take it back a little bit. You being a woman, I'm a woman as well. I understand the struggle that we have in this world and society. How has that affected your chances of becoming successful, or even your experiences that you've had? For worse or for better, and how have you overcome?
For everything there is a time. Mm-hmm. And for many, many years when I was younger, I couldn't understand why Dwayne Hanson and John DeAndrea, who we started at the same time, were well known and I wasn't. Mm-hmm. And how come they had Dwayne Hanson had the Whitney show and I didn't? Mm-hmm. And how come his work was selling for $300,000 and mine was $65,000? So I didn't understand that. But in due time, I sold a piece for over $1 million.
Wow.
And in due time, it comes to you, like I said before. But there is a glass ceiling to break as a woman in business, in life, and in the art world, because it used to be a good old boys club run by curators who were artists and museum directors. But things are changing little by little. And I read an interesting article, and it said, why are there not too many famous women artists?
Yeah.
So there were, but nobody writes about them for years and years. Wow. So there were great artists. And some of the museums now, once they open again, please God, will have shows of women artists. So hopefully it's changing.
It's changing. And you've got to see that change. I bet it's not enough, though.
Not enough.
It's not enough, but it's starting. Hopefully we'll get to a better place one day. And yes, I'm excited. And hopefully the art museums open back up, because I love art too. I'm very interested in it as well. And I'd love to see one of your art pieces in a museum. I gotta go. They are in museums, by the way, all over the world. And you did mention the pandemic. How's the state of the world affected your artwork? Or even how you feel, your inspiration? Have you created more or less art? How was that like?
I've been really lucky. The first few months of the pandemic, I stayed at home like everyone else, and I was getting depressed, and I was getting tired, and I'd fall asleep all the time. And it was awful. I did Zoom calls with my employees, and then I was thinking, I could really get in my car and drive to my studio because there's no one there anyway. So what's the difference if I'm in my studio or if in my house? I'm in my house. And so I did, and I started to create, and I started to paint. And I think there's a lot of healing power in art because I felt better right away. I wasn't tired. I wasn't depressed. I went back to being my usual self, and so I'm very lucky. So once they were able to let manufacturing back, and we manufacture art, some of my assistants, not all of them, came back to work in my Feuerman Studios factory. And we social distance to this day. We don't all eat lunch together. We have work on different floors. We work in different buildings, and we're creating, and we're putting out a lot of work, and 4 new sculptures. One they're all going to come out in 2021.
Awesome.
And it's exciting. One sculpture I that came out during the pandemic is called Eyes Open, and it's a sculpture of a girl with her eyes closed. And why her eyes are closed. Okay.
Tell us.
During the pandemic, we get we think a lot. We get introspection. And I was thinking that we because of the pandemic, we can't keep our eyes closed. We have to open our eyes. And sometimes when your eyes are closed, that's when you actually see. When you're sleeping or when you're thinking or when you're meditating, that's when you get your epiphany. That's when you can think of something. So I did that sculpture about what your heart says when your eyes are closed, and I called it Eyes Open.
That's awesome. So that's coming out in 2021, you said?
That one just came out.
Oh, it just came out.
But
wow.
The other 4 are coming out in 2020.
Other 4 coming out in 2021, my bad.
And one is called Epiphany.
Epiphany. Everything's so fitting. So you guys better watch out for all the new stuff coming, of course. And so let's talk about what do you want to talk about some of the other new artworks that you're having?
Well, the news is
4.
Yeah, not really. I wanted to.
You wanted to keep it low key, secret.
It'll come out when it comes out, when they're all ready to come out. But the names and the titles are befitting what we're going through, like an epiphany or like your eyes open, or it's always about my feelings and my feelings for what's happening.
That's great. So I'll be so excited to see when those come out.
We'll do another podcast.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. See us back here soon, guys. All right. So, your autobiography. Would you want to say a little bit about that? And then we can move on.
Yeah, sure. I've been writing my autobiography, little bits and pieces of it, for at least 15 years because I've led such a privileged life, through the bad, through the good, through traveling, having my work owned by kings and queens and eating with them, and just incredible boyfriends before I got married, and an incredible husband. I've led a very interesting life. So I was keeping these notes, and I always wanted to do my autobiography. So one of the things that have come out of COVID is because I have been less active, even though I'm at the studio, it's a good time to write my autobiography. And it's 24 chapters. I'm hoping to get it out by Christmas.
Wow, very soon.
It will
sooner than I expected.
It won't be expensive like my coffee table books. It should be, like under $20. And
I'll be sure to get a copy.
And I do that every day. And in the middle of the night, I think of what didn't I write about?
Yeah, I'll be sure to get a copy. I mean, your life sounds very interesting, and to see how far you've come and how your career has flourished. That would be very interesting to read about. And lastly, so you also have your latest book, Swimmers, by John Spike, who wrote 50 Years of Looking Good. And he's even compared your work to Michelangelo. And let's take a look here. Where do you think Oops. So your sculpture that looks like Michelangelo, the processes.
This one was compared to Botticelli, Birth of Venus. I
Wow.
did.
Let's take a look.
I did a sculpture called Leader and the Swan, which was bought by the Conrad Hilton Hotel in New York City.
Wow.
And that he compared to Birth of Venus, Botticelli.
Wow.
And
your most famous piece, Serena.
The Serena.
Of course. That's great. Look at that, folks. Awesome work. She's amazing. Sorry, I know I'm blocking your face right now. All right. Carole also has a foundation, her Carole Feuerman Sculpture Foundation, which helps assist deserving artists with grants, visibility, connections in the art world. And you also have an online exhibition you're working on. How can people get involved in that?
Well, I think people have to write to info@carolefeuerman.com.
Great.
You can check the spelling of my name when you Google me, because I'm looking for submissions, and the theme is work during the pandemic, which is what you asked me. I think artists all have been affected by the pandemic. Artists are emotional. They're creative people, and I want to make an online show with what I feel should be shown. So send 5 pictures of your work, a little bit about yourself, to info@carolefeuerman.com.
You guys heard it right there. Well, I'm so happy to have had you here. It is so lovely to have heard about your life and your artwork. And where can people find you? On Instagram.
Google.
She said Google.
Carole Feuerman. I'm on Instagram, Carole Feuerman, Twitter, Carole Feuerman, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube.
All the works, guys. All right, well, it was so lovely to have you. We definitely got to come back here too. And that's that, folks. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.